know it's a little hot up here, but our next guest's movie coming up, Free from Hell, we want you to feel like you're on location. Our next guest was born right here in Connecticut. He began acting in 1982. He's worked with everyone from Tobe Hooper to Sam Raimi to Rob Zombie. One of his iconic characters, Otis B. Driftwood, will return to the big screen in next year's Free from Hell. Let's give a warm welcome to Bill Moseley.
Hello. Oh, God. Nice to be off my feet.
So, Bill, it's not every day that we have a homegrown horror hero, someone born right here in Connecticut.
Yeah.
And it's my understanding you're also a graduate of Yale University.
So, yeah, good old New Haven, Connecticut.
He's a Yale man. How's it feel to be back? You have any warm memories of Connecticut?
Yes, I remember going to a picnic with my father and coming home with my mother. That's a dirty joke. Actually, I can tell you about my birth. I was born in Stamford. And I was actually supposed to come out October 31st. That was what the doctors told my mother. And so my mother apparently got a little Halloween jack-o'-lantern full of candies and in preparation for my arrival. And I didn't show up. I stayed in until November 11th. So instead of a Halloween child, I'm more of a peace child. But, Halloween is in my heart.
Very cool. So acting was not your first career, is my understanding. Is that correct?
Yes, I come from a Midwestern Republican family, Northern Illinois, outside of Chicago, where I grew up. And my dad was he ran a company that made railroad cars, tank cars, and freight cars. And so we really weren't, the idea of one of his three sons, any of his three sons, acting. I mean, it just didn't seem like it was a career. Even though my parents actually were encouraging, they encouraged, the arts, I guess. They both were actors. They acted. We had a little, kind of a little group in my hometown of Barrington, Illinois. And they called themselves the Barrington Play Reading Group, and different families would stage plays. They would have a dinner party, and then they would stage plays at different houses, and they would turn their living room into a set, I guess, for different plays. And I was always hired as the kid. So if a play needed a kid, they kind of got me. And people would get into costume and makeup, but they would basically just read the plays from the playbook. And so I was the kid. So that was kind of how I cut my teeth, I guess, on acting. But the idea of, so everybody, they liked acting, but the idea that it would be a career, no, not really. They were not so disposed. But as it turned out, when I graduated with an English major. So I ended up going to Boston and working as a copywriter in an ad agency. And after about a year of that, I realized that, as in the words of Sam Raimi in Evil Dead, it was like swallowing my soul. And so I got out of advertising. No offense to anyone who's still in advertising, but I got out. I ended up moving to New York City, and I worked as a freelance writer for a bunch of different publications. Worked for National Lampoon. I worked for a science magazine called Omni. Lots of different stuff. So that was basically what I was doing for pretty much all my years in New York City. So that was like until 1986. In 1984, probably before most of you were born, I actually spent a summer on a ranch in Wyoming. It's called the HF Bar Ranch in Cora, Wyoming. And I went out there just to kind of get in shape, and I was like a ranch hand. And I was working one day with a crazy kid named John Wright with a W. He was from Geneseo, Illinois. Not that that means much, but John was a 15-year-old sugar freak that his parents, I guess, had gotten rid of him for the summer to go out and work hard and, I don't know, get off the sugar. I don't know whatever their purpose was. But John was like, every morning he would go into he would drink the bug juice, he would eat the Frosted Flakes, and it was the fudgesicles, and he would, when we were working under the hot Wyoming sun, he would go into what I called sugar deliriums. So he'd be like, we'd be digging something or chopping something, whatever we were doing. And he would start, going into, it was almost like a weird, he was like possessed, basically, by sugar. And he would start, singing top 40 songs. He would do cartoon voices. He was like a nut. And he was like one day, and I would just like turn a deaf ear to him. And one day he was like doing, Captain Crunch, Captain Crunch. I was like, oh God, here he goes again. And then all of a sudden, out of this babble came Texas Chainsaw Manicure. And then he was like, Captain Crunch, back to his thing. And I heard it. It was like, whoa, Texas Chainsaw Manicure. And when we got done with our manual labor, I went back to the bunkhouse, because it was a ranch, and I penned out a little 5-minute scenario about a woman goes to the beauty parlor, get her hair done, she's sitting under the dryer, and she, the beautician comes up and asks if she wants anything else, and she goes, yeah, I think I'll get a manicure. So the beautician, calls to the back of the shop. She goes, manicure, and you hear this rumble of a chainsaw and the sliding of the steel door, and out comes Leatherface. So I had that in mind. I wrote it out. I went back to New York after my stint on the ranch and gathered some friends. We took over a place called Sonia's Hair Fashions on Staten Island, and for one Sunday afternoon, and we ended up shooting the Texas Chainsaw Manicure. That was back in 1984. Because I wrote it and produced it, I also gave myself a cameo as the hitchhiker from the original Texas Chainsaw. And so the story goes on that she says, I want a manicure, and out comes Leatherface, and he starts, comes over to her. She's trapped under the dryer going, no, no, and he's like sawing, and he starts sawing her hands. She's like, screaming. She passes out. And then, they kind of have to bring her back and say, yeah, you okay? You okay? She goes, no. She's got a fabulous manicure. So then she waltzes out to show her husband in the pickup truck, played by me. And she goes, look, honey, I got the best manicure ever. And I go, hey, that's great, honey. We should celebrate with some head cheese. And of course, I was made up as the hitchhiker. I had the wine mark and the whole deal. And I actually went out and bought some head cheese, which doesn't really look very dramatic, but we know what it's made of. Basically, every part of the pig that isn't used in any other product. So it's like, I don't know, the scrotum. I don't know what it is. It's something horrible. And a bunch of jelly and everything. So anyways, but in one take, I actually licked the head cheese, which, and some of you may enjoy it, which is fine. But, to me, it was like, oh, what did I do? But anyway, to make a long story even longer, the manicure was about 5 minutes. It was on VHS tape. And I was working for Omni at the time, Omni magazine, and they sent me on a junket from New York to Los Angeles to cover the making of 2010, the Space Odyssey sequel. And so, we got flown out by the movie company and, given a tour of the set and everything and, talked to the director. And I was writing my story. And well, in the meantime, I had a friend in L.A. who at the time was riding high. He was a screenwriter. And his name was Peter Seaman, believe it or not. And Peter and his partner Jeff Price had just written Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Yeah. So, they were riding high, and I went to dinner at Peter's house, and I brought along the Chainsaw Manicure. And, after dinner, I thought, would you like to see this little short I made? And he said, yeah, check it out. So we put it on, and he loved the manicure. And he said, you know, you got to give me a copy of this, because I'm right across the hall from Tobe Hooper. Because Tobe was at the time working on Poltergeist. And you know, I said, sure, okay, yeah, what the heck. And so my friend walked it across the hall and showed it to Tobe, and Tobe loved the manicure. And I got Toby's home number from my friend too, even though I wasn't supposed to. I hope that's unbreakable. And anyway, so I called Tobe a couple of weeks later. I said, hey, I'm Bill Moseley. I'm the guy that made the Texas Chainsaw manicure. And he said, oh, hey, hell, Bill, I love the manicure. I went, oh, good, well, that's great. And he said, who played the hitchhiker? And I went, well, that was me. And he said, well, if I ever do a sequel, I'll keep you in mind. And I went, okay. And hung up, and I didn't hear from him for 2 years. And then one fateful night, in New York City, the phone rang, and it was a guy claiming to be a guy named Kit Carson, who was the screenwriter of Chainsaw 2. And he said, hey, Tobe and I want to send you a copy of the script of Texas Chainsaw 2. And I went, who is this really? And he said, no, it's Kit Carson. I went, okay. So I gave him my address. They had to send, we had something called mail back then. So they actually sent the script that was printed out. It was in the middle of an envelope. It traveled by, I don't know, Pony Express. And it got to me in New York. And I was supposed to look at the character of Chop Top. And so I did. I read the script, and I thought, shit, Chop Top's a big part. And I thought it was a funny script. And so I called Kit back, and I said, this is great. And he said, well, I'm glad you like it. Thank you. Well, you'll be hearing from us. And I was like, okay. And I'm just like, what the heck? What's going on here? And then a couple of days later, I got a call from the Canon Films legal department saying, do you have an agent, or do you want to negotiate your own contract? I'm like, what is going on here? This is insane. I had no idea what was going on. I said, well, let me get back to you. Thank you. So I had met an agent from William Morris at a Christmas party. So I called her up at work and said, hey, would you negotiate a contract for me? And she said, yeah, sure, it's free money. And so she called up Canon Films and then called me back. I'm still wondering, what is going on? She calls me back and she goes, well, I got good news and bad news. And I said, oh, okay, what's the good news? She said, well, they really want you for this part of Chop Top in the Texas Chainsaw sequel. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. That's awesome. I said, well, what's the bad news? And she said, well, they're only going to pay you scale. And I was like, scale? That doesn't sound good. It sounds like a part of a fish or something. And, at the time, as a freelance writer in New York, I was probably averaging about $250 a week. And I said, well, what's scale? And she goes, geez. And this is SAG, Screen Actors Guild union scale. And I said, well, how much is it? And she goes, well, I don't know. I think it's like $1,700 a week. I was like, what? That's insane. That's like more than I make in like 6 months. So that wasn't so bad. And then she said, well, there's more bad news. They want you to shave your head because there's prosthetics and they have to put a plate on your head and everything. I was like, okay. She said, well, I told them that you wouldn't be getting acting parts until your hair grew out, so they've agreed to pay you $5,000 to shave your head. And I was like, what? What is going on? It's like I was on LSD. It was like, what the fuck? So that's how I got the part. I never auditioned. I made the manicure. I listened to that crazy kid on Sugar back on that fateful day in Coro, Wyoming, and
it all came together.
Yeah, it all came together.
So,
thank you. I know that's a long story. I was trying to make it brief.
I appreciate the detailed response. So, not only are you an actor and a writer, but also a musician.
Yeah.
And Chop Top followed you into Corn Bugs with the legendary guitarist Buckethead. And you recently collaborated with Philly Anselmo, is that correct?
Yes, I did. I did indeed.
So how'd you get into the world of music? And does it relate to your experience as an actor, or do you feel like they're two different things?
No, it absolutely relates. It relates just, I think, because of rhythm. So I think that's part of it. And when you're acting, there's certainly rhythms to the scene. And so I guess it's good to be musical in that respect. I think I really got into it because my family went on long car trips when I was a kid. And we sang songs, like a lot of songs, while we were driving like 6 hours to northern Wisconsin and stuff like that. So I think that was part of it. My mom was a piano player and great boogie woogie, loved Fats Waller, Alligator Crawl, and Scott Joplin, and Rags, and boogie woogie. My two brothers and I have an older and a younger brother, and the three of us all were forced, at least for my attitude, forced to take piano lessons as a kid. My older brother and my younger brother are both, good piano players. My younger brother is deceased, but he was a great piano player. My older brother was a good piano player. I did not really like the piano, but I finally found my instrument after beating on the dashboard of our car a lot and hitting wastebaskets upside down. I am a bongo player. So that was my real instrument of choice. The first band I was in was my two brothers and I had a band called the Moseley Brothers. And we would make up songs and, had a lot of fun doing that. But it wasn't until, then I was musical in school, high school and stuff, and chorus and stuff like that. But when I was doing a play in Los Angeles, probably in 1990, it was a play called Timothy and Charlie, and it was a play based on a factual night when Timothy Leary and Charles Manson were side by side in solitary confinement in San Quentin prison. It was one night when that happened, and based on that, the playwright, a guy named Tim Reel, made this play, Timothy and Charlie, which is basically a two-character play. The two of us, Timothy and Charles Manson, taking acid, side by side in prison, and we take acid, and then we have this great discussion about drugs. I don't know, crazy play, but and the Manson girls. There was a musical number where they were dancing around with Sharon Tate. I mean, it was a kooky play. But anyway, oddly enough, I played Timothy Leary. A guy named Gil Gale played Charles Manson. And it was actually it was a really cool play. Timothy Leary himself came to, I think we did maybe 12 performances, and Timothy Leary showed up at maybe 7 of them. He loved the play, and he loved my depiction of him for some reason, so we became pals from the play. And Gil, the guy who played Charles Manson, was a friend of Buckethead. And apparently Buckethead was a big Chop Top fan from Chainsaw 2. So Buckethead came to a show one night, and I met Buckethead. And Buckethead, strange fellow, and he wanted to jam. And so he gave me, he wanted me to come down and go off as Chop Top over some of his guitar riffs. So I said, sure. So I went down, it was in Los Angeles, and I went down and jammed with Buckethead. And it went so well that Buckethead was just about to do an album called Giant Robot. And so he invited me to come to New York and go, be Chop Top on his record. So I thought, wow, that's going to be great. I'm going to be a rock star. Isn't that fabulous? And I just thought, I don't know if I can really do Chop Top. I don't own Chop Top. It's, happens to be Canon Films. It's copyright. And so I was just about to get on the plane to start my, career as a rock star. And, and I called up a friend of mine who actually was a professor of copyrights, at a college in Los Angeles. And I said, can I do Chop Top? Is that going to be okay? And he said, well, no. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, they copyright it, so you'd be in violation, so they could sue you. So I wouldn't do it. I said, well, what should I do? And he said, well, just make up another character. And I hung up the phone thinking, wait a minute, that's my character. So on the plane to New York, I was trying to come up with a new character, which is hard because, Chop Top, I love Chop Top. But I came up, I was kind of scribbling away. I was thinking about what kind of character. And then I saw like a ranch or a farm, and I saw like little, dismembered hands running around. I call it the ranch hands, these little hands. And then I saw a scarecrow, and I thought scarecrow. So I thought, shoe for scare, shoe, like shoe fly. And then for crow, I thought bird. So I came up with this character called Shoebird, Shoebird the Scarecrow. And I remember, showing up at the hotel with Buckethead had been putting in a hard day on his album. And so I showed up. I was a little, leery because, of course I wasn't going to do Chop Top, and I had to tell him. And he goes, hey, man, how you doing? I go, good. And he goes, well, you ready for tomorrow? And I go, yeah. I go, there is one slight thing. I can't do Chop Top because he's a copyrighted character. And I've never seen a person's face literally darken. I mean, Buckethead was not happy about this. And he was like, all of a sudden, this whole energy just like turned into evil. And I'm thinking, oh, fuck, I'm not going to be a rock star. So I started like going, what? But I came up with this new character. And he's like, he's still just kind of sinking into this, swamp of doom. And I go, hey, yeah, it's a Shoebird. It's like a scary scarecrow, Shoebird. And Buckethead is just really, I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm screwed. But they could have put me on the next plane, and that's the end of my rock career. And then Buckethead said, no, I got a name. And I go, what? He goes, no. I go, no, really, what? He goes, no. I go, what? It's my rock career. And he goes, onions. I went, onions is Scarecrow? I said, that's awesome. That's cool. That's great. And so Onions was born. And so on the Giant Robot album, we went into the studio the next day. Bill Laswell was the producer, and I did Onions Unleashed. And he liked that so much, he, Buckethead, and everybody, that I ended up doing something else called I Come in Peace on this album. And so that was kind of the beginning of it, where it kind of, I was in the studio, and, all of that stuff kind of started my blood cooking. So when I started doing conventions, that was right around that time, I thought that there was, instead of just having 8x10s, like signing, the same old thing, although I do love Dog Will Hunt, don't get me wrong. But I thought, it'd be cool to have like more than just 8x10s for the fans. I think it would be cool to have like maybe cassettes, because this was a while ago. And so I went to Buckethead and I said, man, we should make some music, let's do it for the fans, make some fun music. And so he said, great. So we actually went to his rehearsal studio and started, the career of the Corn Bugs. And Buckethead named the band because I was in his mother's corn patch, on a video one time, and I was looking at the ears of corn, and they all had bugs. So I went, oh, Corn Bugs! And so that became the name of our band. And we ended up doing about 5 CDs worth of music, and over a period of about 10 years. After Corn Bugs, I teamed up with a guy named Ronnie Sharon from a band called Stolen Babies. And we did an album called Spider Mountain, No Way Down. And actually, Ronnie's twin brother Gil is the drummer for Marilyn Manson. And then, finally, I became friends with Phil Anselmo. He's a huge horror fan, and we became buddies. And I kept kind of, saying, hey, wouldn't it be cool to like get together and make some music? And I think it's kind of like saying, hey, Paul McCartney, wouldn't it be cool to play bass in our garage band? And, kind of like, yeah, thanks, Bill. But one day, Phil, I guess, was annoyed enough and said, look, I got 4 days. In the next week, you come down here to Louisiana. And I went, okay. So I grabbed up some lyrics and I got on a plane and I rented a car and I got to Phil's place. And so we worked for about 4 days on Bill and Phil, Songs of Darkness and Despair, which is really actually fun. It's an EP, so it's like 6 songs, I think. And we cranked them out. I thought Phil was going to sing, but he said, no, you're the vocalist. I'll do the music. So he does the music. I do the vocals. You can hear a little bit of Phil in there. And, that's my Phil story.
Very cool. So we're running out of time, so I got to ask you about Three from Hell. First of all, if you could tell me the ending, how it ends.
Yeah. Well, wouldn't that be cool?
Okay.
I'm always afraid that Rob has a drone or something, or maybe one of you is a robot or something that's like sending all the messages back.
All of a sudden, the lights are.
Yes, I can't really talk about Three from Hell. Here's what I can say. We're finished shooting it. We finished a couple of months ago. It's not coming out until early 2019 because Rob was on the road with Marilyn Manson. Some of you saw him. Twins of Evil tour. And so he, according to his Instagram, so I'm safe to say, I think today if he's working today, it's day 5 of editing Three from Hell. I think there's a lot of footage, so it's going to be a lot of work. But I did say, how's it looking? I texted him a couple days ago. And, he sent back in all capital letters, epic. I thought, yeah! So it's going to be, I hope, I don't really know for a fact, but, my nose is growing. But it should be filled with gratuitous violence. Senseless bloodshed, and basically everything, basically depraved characterizations and a lot of fucked up shit. And so I think it's going to be basically an antidote for, what some of us like to call corporate horror, where everything is pretty sanded and smooth. I think this is going to be really a great entertainment. I, for one, am really looking forward to seeing it because, I need something bad. And this is going to be bad. And it's going to be in the theaters because it's going to be in the theaters. Let's put it that way.
So Devil's Rejects, you were on the set about 4 years after House of a Thousand Corpses. This one's 14 years later. What was that experience like? Getting in the makeup, return to set, seeing your castmates, Sid Haig, Sherry Moon, seeing Rob again. Was that experience any different given the breadth of time that had passed?
Well, first of all, it took about 1 year and 2 months to grow my beard. So I'd been, I had been alerted like 1 year and 2 months earlier that we're going for it. So stop shaving. So my face started growing. So at least I was kind of psychically prepared. I got the script, I read through it. I was not psychically prepared, but there was a scene like right one of our first shooting days. I'm being, it's just Otis talking to some cameras, and I have some kind of a rant, and I started, I started to rant, I started to do it, and I fumbled some lines. So I was cut. Okay, take 2, action. And then I started to do it, and I fumbled some lines again. And I was cut, and then Rob was kind of like, and, so I said, give me a moment. So I'm sitting there, and then I hear this voice saying, Bill, this scene does not really need an insecure actor. So please just get out of the way and let me just do this. And it was Otis. Otis was like, we don't need, the California, it's my better side. And so Otis just kind of gently but firmly got me out of the way. The next take was fucking awesome. And the rest of the shoot was really a lot of fun, just riding Otis's coattails. The Devil's Rejects and now Three from Hell are really the only two movies where I've actually reprised the same character. You know, there never really was another Chop Top. I mean, yes, All American Massacre, but that never came out. You know, but for the most part, I've never done a character a second time, or now a third, and it really felt good. You know, at first it was, again, like I was in my head about it, like, oh my God, 14 years, what are they going to think? You know, just shut up, get out of the way. I got this. And Otis rocks this movie. All the characters rock it. The story is awesome. It's really a movie that I personally can't wait to see. So I hope you enjoy it.
Cool. I know I'm speaking for everyone in this room when I say I can't wait to see it. And on behalf of CT HorrorFest, I want to say thank you so much for coming out here, spending time with us, sharing some stories. Let's give a round of applause to Bill Moseley.